At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
But I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, pistols and fondle slap of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from, as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to have just read two sources. Whenever I try to prove out, it's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to sadly disappoint another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty old man, huh?
Really? Can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions. Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2. Within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America, we bring you the Ochelli Effect.
It's like, damn sure, no, I'm an original.
We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for
That's that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
And that is allegedly that as we return to live broadcasts on UCY.TV radio. It's a Saturday night, February 28th, 2015. Good evening to you all. So, I'm not even going to bother to talk about the news or anything else because, I actually caught one of those replays of my show which airs on Monday nights here on UCY, and it reminded me that I really needed to get John Barbour back on the show. You know what it is? This is kind of like decompression time for me because I've been digging into MK Ultra, JFK stuff that people are asking me to verify, 9/11, the Mossad, the intelligence complex. This is what I've been occupying myself with, while at the same time being compelled to try and get myself back into picking up that pen that I swore I would not pick up again. But anyway, this is the kind of stuff that's been occupying my mind lately, and in a way, I can never quite avoid all serious topics, but at the same time, it is always a pleasure to talk to John because, first of all, to me, we're talking to somebody who is a media legend, and for more than one reason. I was listening to, like I said, that replay that they do on Monday, which now it just says the Ochelli Effect Rewind on Monday nights, and I think it was the first show they aired was like the first show that I did with John Barbour. And I realized while listening back to myself, which I don't like to do, okay, which I don't like to do, that you know what, I simply said, assuming everybody in the world knew who John Barbour was altogether, I skipped over a whole bunch of stuff about this man. And he's been on my show 3 times, and I don't think I ever really covered his career. I mean, we talked about stories, we talked about various figures, we talked about his experiences regarding the Jim Garrison film, which to me is one of the most important documentaries ever made about the JFK assassination. But we didn't really get into John that much. I mean, we got into some very interesting stories. I mean, we got to hear about the attempted prison break while he was trying to get away when he was being held, because he was a Canadian that didn't quite belong in the United States at the time, and all that kind of stuff. And it was fascinating. It was entertaining. It was interesting. But you know what? I didn't put enough focus on John. So I had to have him back. People have always commented to me about those shows, and so I'm really, really proud and happy to have John Barbour back on with me. How are you tonight, sir?
Well, Chuck, I'm just terrific, thank you. I'm a lot like you in one respect. I really don't like to listen to my shows, and when I was on television, I didn't care much about watching them, and one of the reasons was that I was never quite interested in my voice. I'm married to a woman who sings like Ella Fitzgerald. Not only can she sing, she has the greatest speaking voice next to Patricia Neal, the actress, that I have ever heard. And as a matter of fact, sometimes when she answers the phone, some people think it's me because she has a deeper voice. So I don't like to do that. Also, I don't care to really chat about myself too much. My thing for me is I love to tell people's stories, and that's why I created Real People. And I love to make comments, hopefully humorous comments, about what's going on in the world. And I guess I was sort of a born critic, because as a critic, I was the film critic for LA Magazine for 10 years and then 5 years at NBC in Los Angeles, is because it's something, I had really no social skills, I guess because of my background. And so once I got married, I just enjoyed being with my wife and my son. And so being a critic and sitting in my little office and commenting on the rest of the world and other people's work, which obviously made me a very good living, that's what I felt most comfortable doing. Oh, and speaking of sons, by the way, that picture you have of your son as your profile picture on Facebook is just adorable. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you, John. I really do appreciate that. And you were talking to me around the time he was born, and we had a lot of conversations, about the look in his eyes and all that. And I really appreciate the compliment. And yeah, you were a film critic. That's one of the things that everybody seems to skip over, unless they go to johnbarbersworld.com and they take a look at, a lot of the things that you've done. They can get some information on you, and definitely suggest anybody listening to us to go over there and take a look at that. But also, your commentary is extremely interesting. This is why that book was put together, John Barbour's Facebook, right?
Yeah, and it's surprising that it's doing quite well. And then the last word on the assassination, which has had almost no promotion, except, first of all, fellows like yourself and Leno Sonic at Black Op Radio, and Brent Holland, another a fellow Canuck, and then George Knapp, who is by far the best host on Coast to Coast. He is the Sunday night host on Coast to Coast. Mm-hmm. It sells 2 or 3 a day, which is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I don't know if you know much about Amazon, but they have about 600,000 titles. And when we went up there in February after we did the event at UNLV, it went up as like number 437,000. Within a month, it was like number 1,300. And about 2 months after that, it was in the top 15 and has stayed in the top 15 of all the Amazon films and documentaries ever since that time. So it is word of mouth that is doing it for us. As a matter of fact, Chuck, I think the last time I talked to you, I was on my way to Dallas to speak at my one and only JFK function. Mm-hmm. And I am never going to speak at another one of these functions. A number of people, one of the largest ones was put together by Sarah Wecht and his son at a university in Pittsburgh for the 50th anniversary. And a number of people contacted Sarah Wecht's son, who was running it, and said, you should have John Barbour on to talk about, you guys have 50 people talking, but the most important voice ever about the assassination of John Kennedy is that of Jim Garrison, which is in John's documentary, so you should have John come back there and talk.
Well, just so you know, and I didn't let you know this at the time, but I was one of the people who contacted Ben Wecht and suggested that to him as well.
Well, thank you, but he contacted me and said, you're welcome to come and sit in the audience. I mean, was that insulting? So anyway, Judith Barry Baker heard about that, Chuck, and she called me and asked me if I would come to Dallas and speak at her function. And I said, I will do it, and it'll be my one and only time, because a number of supposedly the better assassination conferences all turned me down from requests from people as credible as yourself, including people like Joan Mellon, who's written a definitive book on Jim Garrison and who knows more about the CIA than perhaps the people running it at Langley.
Well, two rather definitive books on Jim Garrison, actually. One of them covering the JFK assassination investigation rather thoroughly, which is called A Farewell to Justice, and the other one is merely a biographical piece, because that is really Joan's skill set. It's writing the biography of individuals, and of course she personally knew Jim also, but the thing is that she's actually written 2 books on him and was one of the people who appeared on that DVD that you were talking about that's selling so well on Amazon now, along with Jim Mars and Dick Russell. Dick Russell, one of the most underrated people as far as the JFK assassination goes. Of course, a lot of people know him very well by being, Jesse Ventura's co-author. I say that in quotes.
Yeah, Dick wrote one of the really, really good books about the assassination, The Man Who Knew Too Much. And he and Jim Mars and Joan Mellon at the end of the DVD. I've had so many people contact me and say, you should take them to Broadway, because they were just an absolutely fabulous panel. But the interesting thing I will just tell you a little bit about why I'm not going to do another one of these things. And I told this to the standing room only audience that was there to listen to me, and a number of the other very good speakers. Not that I was a very good speaker, but I was the only one speaking about Garrison. And when I was finished scolding them, I got this huge ovation. And I imagine that they're probably putting some videos together that Judith will try to sell. But I'm telling you, this is why I will never appear at another one of these functions. And it makes absolute and total sense. Now, this is for anybody, and I guess everybody who listens to you, Chuck, is interested in the murder of John Kennedy. And as you know, over the past 44 years, I've paid a lot. I mean, financially, personally, professionally, trying to tell Jim Garrison's story. And a lot of people have paid their own prices. So, Chuck, it's with very mixed feelings that I tell you people this. Every year since then, there have been countless gatherings and seminars around November 22nd, beginning mostly in Dallas, but spreading all around the country from Pittsburgh to New Orleans to New York, involving hundreds of very bright, dedicated researchers and authors. This past year, at Judith's function, there was something planned in Dallas called a moment of silence. As well-intentioned as this is, and no matter how sympathetic I am to those who organized it or any other tribute, Chuck, it is all an absolute feel-good waste of time and energy. We do not need a moment of silence. We've had 51 years of silence from the government. What we need is a more massive moment of outrage. The focus should not be on Dallas, where the murder occurred. It should be in Washington, where it was planned. I would suggest that these scores of various groups and the thousands of individuals who attend and contribute to these gatherings forget their separate functions, join forces for a once-a-year mass vocal demonstration in front of the White House or Justice Department, and do it every year until that silence is broken. November 22nd, Chuck, should become America's Bastille Day, where we storm the massive bureaucratic barricades and free the truth that we all really know. If not, then despite all your noble purposes and scholarship, if you continue these separate and isolated get-togethers, then as Bob Dylan said, you're just continuing to do what the CIA wants you to do, which was blowing in the wind. And then, Chuck, I close by telling them this. In the 1970s, and I'm sure you're aware of this, and the people who listen to you are aware of this, Frank Church conducted really intensive, terrific hearings into the Central Intelligence Agency, which were broadcast. They found out in the 1970s that there were over 1,000 paid CIA assets working in every aspect of the media. They were at CBS, they were at ABC, they were at NBC, only the three networks then. They are now all over CNN. They were at Life magazine, Time magazine, New York Times, all the major media in this country. And the reason they were there is we were sort of fighting pseudo-real enemies in the 70s, those pseudo-enemies being the Viet Cong. Another war into which another nefarious president, Lyndon Johnson, lied us into. We've been lied into every war from Korea to Iraq to Afghanistan. The only war we weren't lied into, and there's some question about that, was World War II. Now imagine, Chuck, they have 1,000 paid CIA assets then when there was an enemy you could see. Now there is no enemy you can see. So how is the establishment and the 1% going to continue to raise our tax money to feed this military machine when we have no enemies? So what they do is they invent boogeymen that you can't see. It's like Casper the Unfriendly Ghost. They created something called terrorists, which Gore Vidal said is like a war on dandruff. It's never ending. So they have these phantoms in Iraq, and they have them in Libya, and they have these phantoms in Afghanistan. But that's not enough for them now. Now they've created terrorists, phantoms in the United States of America. And right now, today, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, has the ability to arrest you or me for what it is we're saying now, because we're giving aid and comfort to these non-existent terrorists. You can be put into solitary confinement without benefit of a lawyer. And that's how bad all of this is becoming. And while we're on that subject, anyway, I told the audience this, and I said, I'm telling you something. The CIA is smart. It's probably the only government agency that functions properly. They have very bright people working for them, and I guarantee you that some of the most prominent JFK assassination sites are run by people who work for the Central Intelligence Agency. And I'll give you an example. Now, I'm not saying this, I'm not going to mention this lady's name. You probably know her well. She's well known in the community. But when I could not get anyone except George Knapp to talk about the Garrison tapes, I notified this lady who has a site in Dallas. The site is called JFK Lancer. And I said, look it, you can have this for nothing. I sent this also to the other 11 prominent sites, Chuck. I said, you take this documentary, you put it up for nothing because you're interested in presenting the truth about the assassination. And there's nothing more truthful than Jim Garrison's investigation, in which he uncovers the proof that the Central Intelligence Agency killed John Kennedy. I got a very rude reply from that lady, and not one of these people would put it up. So I'm telling you that some of those folks are CIA. So I told Judith's audience, I said, if you really care about the death of John Kennedy, that crime with the Justice Department is still an open case. There is enough evidence extant to prove that the media lied, to prove that the autopsy was never performed properly, that there was all kinds of dreadful stuff going on, including NBC, which sent Walter Sheridan down to New Orleans to bribe Perry Russo to get him to California so as not to be a witness at the Garrison trial. That's the way Jim Garrison got equal time late night on NBC, and that is the reason that Ronald Reagan scuttled the fairness doctrine. Because when I was in television, Chuck, I had Ronald Reagan on my show. Because he was Republican, I then had to have a Democrat. And because I had a Democrat and Republican, I then had to have a socialist, and then I had to have a Nazi. There was such a thing as the fairness doctrine. If the fairness doctrine existed today, there would be all kinds of whistleblowers and truth tellers all over the media telling us what really is going on. But Ronald Reagan and the one percenters saw Jim Garrison at 11:30 on NBC and said, Jesus Christ, we can't have people telling the truth to America. Kill the fairness doctrine, with which they did. So in any event, I told that these folks, if they really cared about the truth, you could now go out and arrest people. There are dozens of people still alive who are knowledgeable and complicit in the murder of John Kennedy and also Robert Kennedy, and forget these waste of time November 22nd gatherings. And while I'm on the business of this, I'll say this one last thing, and we'll get to something that you probably want to talk about that's a little less controversial.
You are doing just fine, John. Don't let me stop you.
Okay. I'm going to make and some people will absolutely hate me for this, but I'm telling you, there is a commercial, an ever-present commercial on television, Chuck, that I find absolutely and totally repugnant. It's from a private outfit called Wounded Warriors. Have you ever seen it?
Yes, I have.
Okay. It tugs at your heartstrings and purse strings, asking for a $19 monthly donation. And they do this by showing various veterans with missing arms, limbs, and sight. I want you and every one of your listeners to Google the Tampa Bay Times in Florida. They did an excellent in-depth story and expose about this outfit's 18 highly paid executives, over $100,000 a year. They spend $40 million on ad campaigns like this so they can pay themselves these $100,000 salaries, and over $100 million for promotions, with fractions going to vets. 2 goddamn presidents. Well, war criminal George Bush, a draft dodger George Bush, and Obama and the Pentagon lied these poor men and these youngsters who couldn't find work. And the reason they couldn't find work, because that other draft-dodging bastard, Bill Clinton, signed NAFTA, sending jobs overseas. So Bush and Obama lied these people into 2 illegal wars. They alone should be taking care of this cannon fodder. Half of the budget, which they'd never miss, taken away from the Pentagon, would not only take care of the troops they've used and abandoned for the most part, but, Chuck, it could fund the education of every student in America, eliminating student loans, plus provide a health care system that would be close to being free, as it is in dozens of other more humane and saner societies. I'm going to tell you something about student loans. Do you know that is the most profitable enterprise for banks in America today? More profit is made from student loans by American banks than Exxon Oil makes in a year. The difference is, if Exxon happens to go belly up, they can go bankrupt. they can stash their money in foreign banks and write it all off, but save their money. But if you have a student, for example, when your son grows up, if you are misfortunate enough to have to take out a student loan to send your boy to college, and he takes those student loans and he can't get a job because there won't be any jobs by the time he gets out of college, he can never file bankruptcy. He can never, ever file bankruptcy. That means he could get a job, they would garnish his wages. That's how dreadful this society has become, being run by banksters and gangsters. Anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get Jerry.
No, John, it's okay because I absolutely agree with you. I posted the link to the Tampa Bay Times regarding 58% of the Wounded Warrior Project's money going into advertising. I just posted that. I also posted the Jim Garrison response while you were talking earlier to NBC, which I have up on my Daily Motion and my YouTube channel. By the way,
that is so wonderful. I thought maybe because I'd been a critic or something that you might have wanted to talk about the Oscars or the Academy Awards or movies or something like that, which is, I'll tell you, kind of a cute. Well, I was just going to say, you know, the word from insiders is that over the past week, Brian Williams has been suicidal. But I just checked today, Chuck, and found out he's still alive, which means Brian is still lying. In any event, it's getting up to be my wife's birthday next week, and so I wanted to do something nice for us, sort of a week in advance. So I don't know. Have you been to Las Vegas?
Not in a very, very long time.
Well, they have a wonderful upscale mall now. It's called Fashion Square Mall. It's opposite Steve Wynn's hotel. Anyway, I took my wife there for lunch, and afterwards I just told her I'd go sit outside and for her to go to Nordstrom or Needless Markup, which is Neiman Marcus. And I said, you know, get yourself something because your birthday's in a few days. So I was sitting there in this very upscale place, and this elderly black man came up to me. He looked pretty well fed, and his teeth were surprisingly good. And he was in his late 50s, I presumed. And he asked me if I could spare $2 for something to eat. Now, I don't think you can get anything really good to eat for $2 near the Fashion Mall. And I must tell you, I am so bummed out by being hounded every day, a number of times, by people who are hitting on me for a few bucks. And I'm leery about giving them $2 because it'd probably go to booze. So I looked at this guy, but I felt bad because I knew my wife was going to go out and spend some money. And I said, follow me. So I took him by the arm and I led him into Maggiano's and up to the bar. Maggiano's is on the second floor, and it's really, really a terrific, expensive Italian restaurant. So I sat him down at the bar. The bartender looked at him, wasn't too pleased by his new customer. And I said to the gentleman, I said, okay, go order what you want. So he asked the bartender for a cheeseburger. And the bartender was delighted. He said, we don't sell cheeseburgers here. You have to go downstairs. So the guy says to me, he says, can I take the money and go downstairs? And I said, no, I'm going to feed you here, okay? I'm not going to let you out of my sight till I seen that you've eaten. So here's the menu. What do you want? So he ordered a $13 meatball sandwich and a Coke. So including the tip, it cost me $20. And I thought as I went back out to sit down, I thought, you know, I should feel good that I did this nice thing. But I felt like I was really stupid. I should have given him the $2 and let him spend it in the way that he wanted. So, well, anyway.
But you know what, John? The thing is you're a real human being. you wanted to make sure the guy got fed. And, you'd rather spend the $20 than let him have the $2 that might go into the bottle. So I understand. I really do.
I guess I was feeling kind of weird because I saw something that gave me the impression, Chuck, that more and more people are becoming less interested in people and more interested in things. For example, at the Oscars last Sunday, did you watch the show? The Oscars?
No, I had no interest. I'm sorry.
Well, listen, I had no real interest in it either, but I figure it's sort of my job. And speaking of my job, I have a new bi-monthly radio show every second Monday from 5 to 6 Pacific time. And I'm going to tell you about, have you ever had Helen Caldecott on your show?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you must book her. The lady is brilliant, but I'll tell you about her in a minute. Anyway, so I felt it was part of my job, if I'm going to inform people or talk to people or do reviews or whatever, that I should be current on what's going on. And of course, the Oscars is America's most celebrated look at our bread and circuses and popcorn for the brain. But if you watch the Oscars, and you have seen them sometime, and everybody knows this, last week, dozens and dozens of the world's most beautiful women, Chuck, actresses, wore absolutely unbelievably beautiful, costly dresses. To date, Chuck, fewer than 1,000 people have tweeted about them. But in one day, an empty $75 ordinary black and blue dress from England elicited 11 million comments from around the world when asked the simple question, what color it was. Empty dresses must be loved by empty heads, and America is and the world are absolutely full of them. Did you see that black and blue empty dress?
You know what? I saw that, and I also saw a little bit of an uproar about the alleged racial disparities, in the Oscar awards, and I found the whole thing laughable. I didn't understand. I didn't understand why people are still on this, or what this has to do with the reality of the art form. Because I appreciate film as an art form. I really do. I appreciate film as an art form. I appreciated at one point television as an art form. I appreciate music. I appreciate any sort of performance where an individual has to step into another realm, where somebody has to become something else, where someone has to convey an emotion, convey an idea, convey a story. I love that sort of thing.
There is absolutely nothing more effective, truthfully, than a good film. I mean, it's often more effective than a great book, often more effective than a great television show, except I must say that when Real People was at its peak and getting itself 25,000 pieces of mail a week, we were responsible for 5 pieces of legislation in just the 3 years that I was producing and writing that show, got more legislation passed that benefited the public than did 40 years of 60 Minutes, which is the best news program, or was the best news program for a while. When Don Hewitt was there. But just a word about the Oscars, and if you're interested, you know that I knew a fella named Hal Cantor, who was the most brilliant gag writer in Hollywood, and he wrote the Oscars for like 25 years. He was a very, very, very good friend of mine, and he had me speaking a lot of functions where he couldn't speak. And and he used to do the warm-ups for Johnny Carson and Bob Hope at the Oscars, and one year he couldn't make it, and he asked me to do it. But I could tell you about that story a little later. But about these Oscars, I must tell you, and you'll probably agree, and anybody, I'm sure, would agree. I said I watched. Listen, I ran out of Pepto-Bismol, Chuck, so I didn't have the stomach to watch it for more than a few minutes. And it's astonishing that the entertainment capital of the world, since its inception, has been totally incapable of presenting a truly entertaining show. I mean, Chuck, it's like that billion-dollar next-generation supersonic jet fighter the government has been pouring our tax money into for 20 years into a plane that is yet to fly. And since Bob Hope and Johnny Carson died, the Academy has been totally unable to find a classy host. Now, they picked this guy, Neil Patrick Harris. You know who he is?
Vaguely, yeah.
Well, Neil Patrick Harris, I say this guy because he was dressed like one. We now watch Neil Patrick Harris die. It was like watching 6 episodes of The Walking Dead. This guy, Neil Patrick Harris, I'm telling you, Chuck, is everywhere. He's like that little lizard from the Geico commercials.
Right.
Now, they say this guy is a great actor. He's a Broadway performer, and as a Broadway performer, he's quite good. But I've seen him in his hit sitcom on CBS. I've seen him in 2 of his movies, and one of them was Ben Affleck's Gone Girl. The movie went gone very fast. Anyway, Neil Patrick Harris in this makes mad love to Ben Affleck's runaway wife. Now, I would be happy to call Neil Patrick Harris a very good actor if just once in one of these scenes he could convince me he was heterosexual.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, the best film, you're going to be astonished at a couple of things here. The best film went to Birdman. Now, I love movies about the theater, and I love movies about actors. And to me, the greatest American movie, or any kind of movie ever made about New York actors, was Joseph Mankiewicz' classic All About Eve with Bette Davis. I mean, when Bette Davis is walking up those stairs and she stops and she turns around and looks at her guests and she says, "Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy night." Anyway, I heard from a friend of mine who's an actress that this is quite a good film about actors. But the truth is, Chuck, it lost the reality of it being an interesting character study of a desperate actor by introducing the metaphysical nonsense of giving this guy the ability to fly and float and causing objects in the room to do the same, sort of like a benign carry. So I just sort of floated out of the theater. I mean, it was absolute and total nonsense. But I'm going to tell you something really interesting. One of the producers of this is a fellow by the name of Arnan Milchan. That's Milchan. Arnan Milchan. You Google that name. This guy is a monumentally good producer. Remember the movie Pretty Woman? Produced that. Mm-hmm. He produced Fight Club, and he produced one of the really good detective stories to come out of Hollywood, and that was L.A. Confidential. Any of those movies ring a bell?
Oh, Fight Club is one of my favorite movies, actually.
Well, there you go. But you know what this guy Milchan is better at than producing? Guess what?
No idea.
Spying. 5 years ago, he came out publicly gloating and bragging about the fact that he was one of Israel's and Mossad's leading spies. And he continues to get the best properties to produce. Now, when I was in the business, they have something which they call it a hyphenate. See, I get a pension plan because I was a writer-host.
Right.
Woody Allen is a writer-director. That's called a hyphenate. Arnan Milchan is a producer-spy.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. And he's getting all of the best properties, and nobody's after him for spying for Israel. What on earth is it that he has uncovered in this country that he delivers to Tel Aviv, for crying out loud? But in passing about movies, this one last thing, and maybe you've noticed this. I don't know if you've noticed it or not, and I'm just the only one who notices bizarre stuff like this. But Hollywood loves movies about geeks and gimps and retards. I mean, Cliff Robertson in Charlie, Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man and Midnight Cowboy, Tom Hanks in Forrest Gump, Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Leg, and now this Redmayne kid, excellent, in The Theory of Everything. And the unbelievable thing about this, Chuck, is that these gimp movies are the movies that Hollywood seems to care most about and write and produce and direct the best.
Well, between that and updating films, rebooting, reloading, as it were, every single franchise that's ever been successful on one level or another, renaming it, retitling it, or rebooting it in one way or another. That's what it seems like they're occupied with.
I don't know if you remember you probably remember the name Jack Benny. Do you remember the name Fred Allen?
Sure I do. Sure I remember Fred Allen and Jack Benny. See, I'll tell you a funny thing about that is that I always think of Chris Rock when I think of Jack Benny, and everybody says, "Why in the hell would you draw a line from Jack Benny to Chris Rock?" You know why? Think about Rochester for a minute.
Oh my God, yes, Eddie Anderson.
There you go. Now listen to the way that Chris Rock talks when he does any sort of routine. Tell me that that's not exactly the same cadence and almost the same mannerisms.
You know, you're absolutely right. That's very observant, except Rochester Rochester sounded a little more like Louis Armstrong than he did Chris, but the cadence is the same. Because Chris Rock is almost an octave higher when he talks. But, do you know how a pearl is formed? A pearl is formed when grains of sand invade an oyster. And these grains of sand irritate the oyster to the point that calcium is formed and eventually turned into a pearl. So I tell people that I run across who are sometimes complaining about the misfortune of their past is that no matter what kind of background you've had, you can turn your life into a gem. And for me, watching that often irritating show last Sunday, the gem that came out of it for me, two things, two gems. One was a performance, and if you Google it, you should see it. Lady Gaga did a tribute to The Sound of Music that was absolutely wonderful. If you get an opportunity, Chuck, since you love music, you will be stunned at how terrific this lady is singing that material. But the gem that came out of it was, and you've probably heard of this, since you're so up on everything, is that the best documentary went to a documentary that probably nobody viewing the Oscars had heard about, and they couldn't get to a theater to see it because it didn't play in many theaters, and it vanished almost immediately, and that was Citizen 4. Have you seen Citizen 4?
I haven't seen the whole thing, John. I haven't seen the whole thing, but
let me tell you.
I bet you a lot of my audience hasn't seen Citizen 4 either.
Okay, I'm telling you. Do you have HBO?
Well, I don't, but there's other ways.
Okay, you tell your audience, because a lot of your audience must have HBO. HBO funded this film for the most part. And I'm just going to tell you very briefly about why you have to see Citizen 4. And maybe the millions of Americans who happen to watch the Oscars are so impressed by something that was brought up at the Oscars that they might find, enough curiosity to venture to HBO and turn it on and watch it, or order the DVD. Chuck, this is why you have to see Citizen 4. This is why Citizen 4 should be required viewing. It is one of the scariest films you will ever see. No one gets killed. Not yet. It's not the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's the CIA, NSA, Obama constitutional massacre. It's a compelling, disturbing, almost heartbreaking behind-the-scenes look at how and why a very appealing 29-year-old Ed Snowden risks everything to try to inform Americans how the security state under a lying Obama is now spying without cause on every single one of us. Now, most of it, Chuck, takes place in a Hong Kong hotel room, which, without intending to, adds to the claustrophobic feeling of being closed in on by the government. To tell us this story, Snowden first sends encrypted emails to Laura Poitras, the filmmaker. And to tell it to the world, she in turn contacts journalist Glenn Greenwald, who was with her at the Oscars. Now, for nearly 2 riveting hours, we watch and listen behind the scenes as Snowden, all alone, almost, Chuck, like a real Jimmy Stewart kind of character out of a Frank Capra movie, unburdens his soul because his belief in the laws his government is breaking, and to protect his fellow Americans whom they are targeting. Aside from discovering how unbelievably likable and supremely intelligent Snowden is, more important, we learn that the government's massive spying has nothing to do with national security. It has to do with advancing and protecting America's corporate and banking interests. Mm-hmm. It's not a movie that'll make you smile, and those folks who hear this are not going to smile. But for a brief moment, you'll give thanks that you still live in a country that can produce young idealists and filmmakers like Laura Poitras, who made this film, except because of the harassment from the government, she's moved to England. Right. And you'll also be thankful that you live in a country that can produce activist journalists like Glenn Greenwald. Except he's so harassed by the government, he moved to Brazil. Right. But more importantly, you will give thanks that America can produce an American activist with the soul and intelligence of an Ed Snowden, to whom Barack Obama should forward his mistakenly earned Nobel Peace Prize, and even he had to leave the country. Oh gosh. Anyway.
No, you're on the right track here, John. You know, this is exactly the kind of stuff that I talk about, all the time. The security state, people don't realize what the danger is from the intelligence complex. They don't realize exactly how out of control that monster is. Everybody points at other boogeymen. The mainstream media doesn't really focus on this. They tell you, people are worried about being surveilled at every turn. That's about all they tell you. They don't explain.
Chuck, I mentioned to you, you write down the name of Helen Caldicott. Now, I don't know how old you are. I don't even know if you remember the Cold War. But I remember the Cold War Exactly. And every day, every newscaster, every government official was telling us to dig fallout shelters and run down to them. If we didn't have a shelter, then we should watch this government movie, Duck and Cover, so we could hide under the school kids' desks, for crying out loud. But at that time, there were scores of brilliant scientists and philosophers speaking out against the bomb. Albert Einstein, Bertrand Russell, Oppenheimer. Those voices are all gone, but the bombs aren't gone. There is only one. Those voices are now embodied in the brightest person on the planet, speaking about the possible dangers of an accidental nuclear holocaust. And that woman is Helen Caldicott. She started out as a pediatrician, and about 40 years ago, when the French started testing their bombs off the coast of Australia and weird things were happening to animal and plant life, she changed course. She is in New York City, as you and I speak right now, doing a fabulous symposium where 50 scientists are going to speak about the possible accidental dangers. What she pointed out, I had her as a guest in my show. And what she pointed out is that Barack Obama has now signed a bill allowing the funding for the rebuilding and modernization of every nuclear warhead in America's arsenal. I mean, it's like we live in this Dr. Strangelove world. But I was so delighted she was on the show because 40 years ago, it was just after, well, it wasn't, it was less than 30 years ago. It was right after I left Real People. I decided that I wanted to do another humor magazine, but not about real people, Chuck, about real news. And we did a pilot that was absolutely brilliant. And the first story is this little 2-minute clip that I'm going to play for you now, that I played for Dr. Helen Caldicott, and she was thrilled because she said, "You are so right on. That is so going on in the nuclear industry today." What I did is I found an article in the Los Angeles Times which talked about faulty construction at the nuclear reactor at San Onofre in Southern California, which is where I and my family live, so I was concerned. So what I did, Chuck, is I did thorough research into every company and every person who was involved in the construction or this faulty construction and recorded them and then put this piece together. And I was so thrilled that Helen came on the show because she reminded me of it. I pulled it out of my archives. It was the first time it was ever played anywhere. Yours will be the second time if you would like to hear it, because the network absolutely refused to broadcast it. It's only 2 minutes. And
sure.
I'm going to play this for you. Here we go. Oops. Make sure I get this right.
Show that proves what Shakespeare said. The world's a stage and we all occasionally fall into the orchestra pit. As you know, politicians are always angry at television. Not because we attack them, but because we quote them.
Well, right now we may upset a few people who are more powerful in our lives than politicians. Clerks and bureaucrats. Because we're going to hear some actual quotes of some of them when they were asked about some semi-sloppy construction at a nuclear reactor.
It recently came to our attention that a nuclear reactor head had been installed backwards at San Onofre, California. So we called to inquire about how it happened, and someone in the public relations office said,
"You better call Cal Edison. They do that kind of work."
When we called Cal Edison, a spokesman said,
"It was installed backwards, but it really wasn't a mistake."
It wasn't?
No, it's what we call a malformance.
We asked them if they also called it a malformance when it was discovered that a reactor in Virginia had been built over an earthquake fault.
The Japanese do that all the time.
We asked Cal Edison how they reacted when they did discover it had been installed backwards.
We laughed. Those things happen. We didn't do the actual installation, though. The Bechtel Corporation did that.
Now, the Bechtel Corporation in San Francisco was sued for over $300 million by the state of Michigan for faulty construction of a reactor built there. Bechtel settled out of court for $14 million. When we asked them about the one in San Onofre, an information officer said,
By some oversight, the reactor head was installed wrong. The arrow that was supposed to point south on the head was pointing north.
Is that dangerous?
No.
It's not?
No.
Why?
Because the pipes which were supposed to be installed on the north are now attached to the head on the south.
And?
Vice versa. What was installed wrong was made right by installing the other things that way.
Are you sure it's safe?
Absolutely.
Then we asked Bechtel if they were the company that contracted to build that nuclear reactor in the Philippines next to an active volcano. And they said,
No, we just built the hotel.
Is that hilarious and scary?
See, it would be extremely hilarious to me, John, if we didn't know, because you mentioned right there in that clip that they built something. Oh, gee, we built one thing along a fault line. I don't know if you're aware of this, but nearly every nuclear facility at this point, all of these reactors, are sitting on fault lines and on very, very precarious positions along coastlines that are extremely vulnerable, just like Fukushima was. Okay?
Well, that's what I must tell you, Chuck, because you're certainly probably going to have a much larger audience than I am. That's why you should have Dr. Caldecott on. Have you ever heard of a fellow named Ken O'Keefe?
I've heard that name.
Well, there's another name you should Google and your audience should Google. His name is Ken O'Keefe, spelled like O'Keefe. First name Ken. He is a Iraqi veteran who gave up his American citizenship and moved to England and was almost murdered when he tried to get supplies and food to Palestinians during the siege. The Palestinian siege by Israel, using Americans' planes and bombs and napalms and rockets and bulldozers. He's the most articulate anti-war activist that I've ever heard, and I'm going to have him on my show Monday. The reason he's coming on is because Netanyahu, uninvited by the President of the United States or the State Department, but that idiot John Boehner is going to speak for the third time in front of the American Congress. Before or right after 9/11, he spoke before the American Congress and told us to invade Iraq, and we invaded Iraq. Now, there are some senators and Congress people who are going to boycott, thank God, and one of them is Bernie Sanders. And I sent Bernie Sanders a note. I said, hey, if Boehner can invite this warmonger to speak, why don't you invite Vladimir Putin to speak to our Congress so we can find out exactly what's going on between Russia and the United States, because we're never going to get it from our government. Now, you know, Netanyahu does not like Obama. And there are a lot of people criticizing Obama for supporting ISIS and all the rest of it. Let me tell you something. Obama supporting ISIS would be like born-again Christians supporting abortion, for crying out loud. Muslims are supposed to be arch enemies of the Jews. Not one Jew has been kidnapped or harmed or had his yarmulke stolen, for crying out loud. It's only Christians that they seem to be going after. And I'll tell you, I am not a fan of Obama. I think Obama is a lawn jockey for Goldman Sachs, okay? The President of the United States does not run the country. John Kennedy found that out in Dallas. We found that out in Dallas. The CIA runs this country for the 1% who own the country. But the one thing I'll say about Barack Obama is ever since John Kennedy tried to get AIPAC registered as a foreign lobby. And Ben-Gurion wouldn't let him in to Israel to inspect their nuclear sites where they have 100 bombs or more. They imprisoned one of their scientists for life when he went public with the fact that Israel had bombs, okay? So now he's going to come here and tell us about all the dangers that Iran might have by maybe getting a bomb, which hopefully that they can get, because if Iraq had a bomb or Libya had a bomb, they would have self-defense against the Peter Sellers lunatics who are running this country. Anyway, the thing I'll say is that Netanyahu and every Israeli president is a presidential puppeteer for the United States, except that Obama is the one president that won't let Netanyahu stick his hand up his ass to move his mouth. Now, it may be because there's also no room there, because there are a bunch of bankers and generals already up there.
You just stole my thunder, John, because that's exactly what I was going to say. There's really no more room in that puppet hole, because the fact is that every other corporate head seems to have at least a finger in there, and it's a lot of fingers, John.
Great minds think alike, Chuck. Chuck, I want to thank you again so much for having me. I didn't mean to go off on all these tangents, but I'm so glad you called me. And I guess it allowed me to get, because I don't yell like this on my own show. I'm much more gentlemanly on my own show. But I want to thank you again for having me, and the very, very best of luck. And this might be one time that I will listen to a show that I did, because I'm curious to see how bad I was.
Oh, John, there is nothing bad about what you're doing here.
Okay. Anyway, Chuck, thank you so very, very much indeed. I really appreciate your time, and I really appreciate your work. And I just love that picture of your son.
Listen, I do appreciate that. I'm going to cover for people a couple of the things I didn't get to with you tonight,
sure.
Afterwards, and we'll see where this goes from here. If you had more time, I'd ask you to hang around more. You could. I've got a whole other hour. So I mean, you're more than welcome to. Even if we want to take phone calls or people want to call me, that's fine too. Everybody, just so you know, the number, by the way, is 718-717-8296. John, I didn't get what I expected tonight out of you. I gotta tell you.
Well, okay, look, I'll hang around for a few minutes. I hope somebody calls. The reason I hope that, I absolutely love. I do rents once a month, and I've been after rents for years to open his phones. I mean, Coast to Coast open their phones. I mean, I think Nuri's inept, but George Knapp is extremely good. And sometimes a caller will call in with really interesting information. And when George Knapp answers the phone, he lets that person talk almost as though they're another guest. And there was some guy on Rentz's show, and I happened to be on Jeff last night, as a matter of fact, and I mentioned this to him. The previous Wednesday, he had this guy on who was bashing America for being so soft on Putin because they weren't knocking Putin out of the Ukraine. And I thought that this was absolute horseshit, for crying out loud. Do you know that ever since the end of the Second World War, Russia, which lost 25 million people in the Second World War, has been surrounded by hundreds of America's nuclear weapons, all the way from Korea to Poland, from Turkey to Japan. I mean, it's literally obscene. And Jeff gave him a platform, and Jeff said, well, I like to hear what the other side is saying. I said, but you didn't challenge him. And I said, if you'd opened the phones, I'd have called in and called him on that. And this guy said that Putin was the largest crook in the world because he takes a rake off at the top of every company that sells something in the Soviet Union. So I said to Jeff, okay, that first of all is none of our business. You know, Guatemala was none of our business. Iraq was none of our business. Afghanistan,
the Congo,
Chile was none of our business. None of that is none of our business, okay? What if he is the biggest thief in the world? How does that compare to the 100,000 thieves that we have in the United States from the CEOs to the bankers to the politicians. These are the people that this guy on Wednesday night should be attacking, and not Vladimir Putin, for crying out loud.
No, absolutely. And you know, I took flack for explaining one time because I had another radio host on. I got to think about it for a second. It was Jack Blood was on my show, and I was saying that I had a whole lot more respect for the Sicilian mafia in this country. I had a whole lot more respect for many organized criminals, as they are labeled, because at the very least, you know what you're getting, and if you do pay your protection money, you might actually get some protection. Okay, and I've said it several times. I don't care. And also, you know what? The only other difference between them in reality as far as criminal activity goes is that the politician does it in a cheaper suit. That's about it. Other than that, like I said, you may actually get protection when you pay your protection money, and they have to send somebody to collect it usually. You know
what would be absolutely wonderful if somebody would do this? I've been involved in a couple of court cases where people were suing for breach of contract, and there was no written agreement with these lawsuits. They were verbal contracts. I remember very, very distinctly when George Bush was running for president of the United States, and he said on CNN, "There will be no nation building when I become president." I would have loved to have somebody file a class action suit against a politician, especially a president, who breaks their verbal contract with the voters of the United States of America. And again, to show you how goddamn stupid we're becoming. Have you seen this Republican from Idaho? His name is Vito Barbera. It was all over Facebook. And it was all over the internet this past week. Did you see it?
Yeah, I did. It's just among the stream of insanity out there. But go ahead. I want to hear your take on this, actually.
Okay, I'll sort of give you a quick recap in your audience of what this guy is saying. Evidently, this is a man who somehow must think that a gynecological examination of a woman, possibly a pregnant woman, by a doctor borders on pornography or obscenity. Because at hearings last week, he asked if it would be possible to determine if a woman were pregnant by, instead of having this gynecological examination, would it be possible to develop a very tiny camera and have her swallow it so we could see if there's an embryo, if there's a fetus in her fallopian tube?
Yeah.
Now, I am telling you, that is so goddamn fucking stupid. You know who I sound like? I sound like Peter Finch, Howard Beale, and Network. Okay, now if you extrapolate this and think about what this goddamn Republican political idiot is saying, but it's not only him. You know, in Texas, the new history books are going to dispense with evolution, and they are now going to have books that say that the world is only 5,000 years old. I mean, it's going to be Charlton Heston crossing the Potomac, for Christ's sake. These people are so insane. Anyway, if you think about this Vito Barbera, this numbskull Republican from Idaho, the potato state, and this is the leading potato head of the potato state. If you think about what he's saying, Chuck, what he's saying in essence is that if a woman performs fellatio on her husband, it's entirely possible that she could become pregnant.
Well, John, now you've blown up one of those things in my mind that I always believed. You're killing me. I thought that happened right after the Easter Bunny took a nap, and this is one of those things.
Well,
now you've blown my mind.
Okay, my closing thought about this is there are supposedly 11 million aliens who've crossed our southern unprotected borders, for crying out loud, to get into this country who may get amnesty. Well, I am one of these people that not only do I hope they already got their driver's licenses, okay? How do they get insurance? Nobody's ever asked that question. But because if I were Allstate, they wouldn't be in my good hands because I wouldn't trust them to stay in the country if they got into an accident. But anyway, I am one of these people that not only hope that they get amnesty and they have their driver's license, I do hope they get to vote immediately because they've got to be a lot fucking smarter than the dumb goddamn idiots who vote for these Republicans in Texas and Idaho and anywhere. Not that Democrats are any better, but they're just not as stupid.
Well, that is one of the good points I have heard made by a couple of other people is that, look, the American electorate has not exactly done us any serious justice here thus far, so maybe it will take, people to come from a place where they're not being vaccinated into stupidity and they're not being stupefied, with every single genetically modified organism, where they're not in areas where they're, completely destroyed by the fluoride and everything else, John. This is the thing. In our wonderful modern what's left of the formerly United States, we are the most vaccinated, most drugged, most mind-controllable fools on the planet, thanks to our, wonderful system here at this point in time. It almost makes you think that we might do better with the aliens voting because at least they'll look at it from a different angle and their IQs might be in slightly better shape. Plus, they didn't have to endure the No Child Left Behind policies and things like that.
Well, the thing that sort of worries me about mankind, when I was a critic, I told my audience a couple of things. First of all, I did not review a movie with my eyes or my ears or my mind or my head. I reviewed a movie with the seat of my pants. And if my pants moved, then I tried to just use my mind to interpret what my pants were trying to tell me. Okay? We are not thinking creatures. We are emotional creatures. If we were thinking creatures, Chuck, we are all heir to all the wonderful wisdoms of the entire world for thousands of recorded years of history. You can get on the internet and you can get into the Encyclopedia Britannica. You can get into absolutely anything you want. So we all have this information available to us. But with all this information available to us, it only proves that we aren't reasoning creatures, because if we were reasoning creatures, we would take all that information and all these facts. You can lead people to the facts, but you can't make them think. We would all be Republicans or Democrats or anarchists or communists or socialists or Protestants, or Catholics, or Jews, or Muslims. But we're not. Why are we not? If we can think and we can reason, the reason we're not is we are emotional creatures long before we even have the ability to think. We only then grow up and use our minds to justify our emotional prejudices. Okay? So, my feeling is that movies, I told my audience, were a lot like people. That 98 or 99% of them were just god-awful. But the one or two that come along, the one or two great films that come along, make all that other garbage worth it. And the one or two wonderful people that you come in contact with in your life make all these other shitheads bearable. And so the smart ones are outnumbered by the thousands by the stupid ones. It's just a law of nature. There are a handful of geniuses. There are a handful of misfits or chemically insane people. But the large volume in between who are so-called normal, they are the most stupid. And they're the ones who occupy the planet. So what it is that you do is that you hope to meet these one or two great artists or these one or two wonderful people, and it makes up for all the rest. And the truth is, it does make up for all the rest.
Well, it certainly can. A friend of mine once said that you know, it is bicycle helmets and Velcro shoes that have done the greatest injustice to the IQ pool that you can possibly imagine. You know, because we've been so protected from ourselves in certain ways. You know, I know that sounds kind of harsh, but
you know, the thing that I started to say 5 or 10 minutes ago before I sidetracked myself, the thing that worries me about humanity and mankind is that every single weapon of combat that we have ever invented, we've used. I mean, when we invented the slingshot, David got Goliath. We invented the bow and arrow, and there's Robin Hood. We invented the pistol, and there's John Wilkes Booth. We invented the atom bomb, and there was Hiroshima, and unnecessarily Nagasaki. We had no need to drop the second bomb in Nagasaki, but that was a warning to the Ruskies. It was General Doolittle, who led the raid on Tokyo, said we'd better win this war, otherwise we're all arrested as war criminals. And I must tell you, America's establishment is peopled and run by war criminals.
Well, absolutely, John. That has been the case, to the best of my knowledge, for at least 50 years now.
So it seems to me, Chuck, that it is inevitable, probably because of human error and human insanity. And there are a lot of people like Teller and Kissinger, a lot of these madmen who've invented these gadgets, and they just want to see if they work. They give no thought to their children and their grandchildren are going to live in this polluted environment that they're going to create with these bombs, and they give no thought to it. They just want the satisfaction of knowing they got to see how they work and how they destroyed people the way they predicted it would.
Well, you know, one of the more interesting statements that was made by the scientists who handed over the nuclear devices that were used in Japan, you know, when they said, look, we've tested this, but we're still not sure if this will light the atmosphere on fire. You know, they still were not completely positive that might not be the reaction from this. It might not create a continuous chain reaction. And guess what? History shows us they still did it.
The thing that enamors me the most.
And I'll get to that caller in just a second. We got one.
No, go to the caller right away and remind me to remind me that I was going to say something. I can't remember what it is, but reminding me when the caller's gone.
No, you go ahead and finish, and also
No. Don't ever keep a caller waiting. Okay.
All right. Well, you're on the air. Caller, you're on. Okay. Why don't Not hearing you, but try and call back if you can get a line. I don't know if you're muted or what you have there. The only thing, obviously turn your radio down because we're in a slightly different time. You'll discover that if you hear us on, through the broadcast, we're behind a little bit. But other than that, try and call back in. Okay.
Then,
sorry about that. Anyway, anybody else wants to join us really quickly, 718-717-8296. You can join in the conversation, ask John a question, ask myself a question, or make a comment, whatever it is you want. 718-717-8296. Okay. Sorry, John. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's all right. What I started to say, one of the things that enamors me the most, America gave birth to the greatest wit in human history, and that's Mark Twain. Mark Twain probably also invented the modern novel with Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. But what a monumental wit. And one of the things that I really love about a lot of Americans, and you see it on Facebook, and you see it on the internet, is Americans, no matter how tough it gets, they have a monumentally wonderful sense of humor. And it's a kind of sense of humor that you don't sometimes even see on The Daily Show or Bill Maher's show or any of the shows. You don't see it anymore. Wit seems to have disappeared from public discourse, but once in a while and often you can find it on Facebook and the internet. I have a friend who's middle class, and he started up upper middle class, and now he's sort of lower middle class, and he's trying to save as much money as he can to stay lower middle class, so he's thinking of ways that he can save money. Well, he has an ADT security system. Do you know what that is, ADT?
Sure.
Okay. It's, I had the ADT security system, and I have their blue and white sign, stuck in my front yard.
And a lot of people actually have gone for the economy program where they just get the sign and don't get the system. But
well, yeah, a lot of them have done that. Unfortunately, it's just initials, so you don't even have to speak English in my neighborhood to know what it stands for. But anyway, it costs him $49.95 a month. So 3 months ago, he decided he's not gonna need it. He doesn't want to spend that $49.95 anymore. So anyway, he canceled his subscription, and they came and they picked up the sign, and in its place he planted an Iraqi flag. And he says now he's better monitored now by the CIA and by the FBI and the local police and NASA than he ever was by AT&T 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And he's saving $49.95.
Yeah.
And then I had a woman friend tell me that she heard that Osama bin Laden had 3 wives, and he was living with these 3 wives for the 5 years that he was in hiding. And the 5 years that he was in hiding, he was alone in the house, a house which he never left, with these 3 women. And this woman friend of mine told me she has heard from reliable sources that it was Osama himself who called the Navy SEALs.
Yeah, well, or whoever that was.
Yeah, whoever that was. Anyway, Chuck, I just got notified from my wife that I'm really, really late, and we're going to be late, and so I'm going to have to part company with you. But again, thank you so much. And if there's stuff that you think about that we haven't touched on, send me a note, and maybe in a couple of months we can do this again. And by all means, don't forget Dr. Helen Caldecott.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask you if you could spell that name for us.
Okay, her name it's Helen, H-E-L-E-N. Last name is spelled Caldecott, C-A-L-D-E-C-O-T-T. C-O-T-T, Caldecott. The other person, and if you happen, I'm on a really, really terrific internet network called BBS. BB is in BB gun, or B and then BS is in bullshit. BBS, run by two twin brothers, Doug and Don Newsom. They do an incredible job, and they've assigned me this young fella named Mike Kim, who's just a phenomenal producer. I mean, just terrific. So I could not, like Allstate, I could not be in better hands than with him. Anyway, next month, in my shows on from 5 to 6 Pacific time every other Monday, and next Monday, or a week from this coming Monday, Ken O'Keefe, who was my first guest, is going to come back, and he's going to give us a review of Netanyahu's speech before Congress. So anyway, you should tune in and listen to that, and you should also get Ken on your show. He's wonderful. You'll love him, and he has a great voice.
Well, you know what? I've made a note of both of these guest suggestions from you, John. I always ask for guest suggestions and don't get too many. I get requests to bring people back, and this is actually the 4th time you've been on my show, and I really do appreciate your time, your efforts. As I've said many, many times, my viewpoint on the media is that, relatively speaking, I mean, it's a lot of garbage at this point. But there was a time when I admired people in the media. You were one of them. And you still are. The fact that you went to great lengths to make sure that Jim Garrison's story got out. Not only were you offering it for free to groups, but you at one time used to actually offer an address and tell people, if you just send me enough money to ship you the DVD, and this is before you did this presentation with Joan Mellon and Jim Mars, you said, if you just send me enough money to send you the DVD so I don't have to take it out of my own pocket, I will send you a copy. I remember you saying that.
Yeah, well, I don't do that anymore because I'm kind of swamped. But
no, years ago, this was something you did. Let me make that clear too. John doesn't do that anymore. But the fact is that he used to do that because he so badly wanted to get this story out, and you did pay a price for getting that story out.
That I did. But if they go to Amazon and they Google or search the last word in the assassination, a couple of things. First of all, they're going to see the most unbelievably beautiful, articulate, unsolicited reviews by people who went to the trouble to buy it and then go back up there and put up a review. But aside from that, they'll see some reviews from some very famous people, from Jesse Ventura to Oliver Stone to Richard Belzer. They could also get the Facebook book for like $2. And the Facebook book is John Barbour's first Facebook, Volume 1, uncensored. It's sort of like chicken soup for the funny bone. You can open it any place, and read a couple of things that make you laugh or make you think or even make you angry. So, and if you don't have much money, you can still go to Amazon. I think for $2.95, you could download this almost 3-hour DVD and record it yourself. And I must tell you, no matter how much you think you know about the assassination, and there are a lot of people who think they know a lot, and there are a lot of people who do know a lot, you're going to be stunned at what you learn when you listen to Jim Garrison and Dick Russell and Jim Mars and Joan Mellon. Anyway, again, thank you so much, Chuck. And we will talk again in a couple of months, okay?
Absolutely, John. And John Barbour's World is I believe, the name of the radio show, right?
That's exactly right. Thank you.
No problem. I just wanted to make sure, because I know I mentioned the website is John Barbour's World. We've talked about Amazon, all these other places, and I'm going to continue to talk about this a bit after you go. But thank you again, John. I really do appreciate your time. Sorry I held you up, and my apologies to your wife as well.
No, you did not hold me. I mean, the truth is, for me, it was very therapeutic. It was. Okay.
Catharsis always is. Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night. John Barbour, you know, an amazing guest. I always love to have him on, and I had no idea what we were going to cover tonight. So, you know, wow. You know, I didn't expect to go in this direction, to be honest with you. I was going to talk to him a little bit about lighter subjects. You heard me set it up at the top of the show, but that's not where we went. Meanwhile, excuse me for coughing, but meanwhile, if you wanted to get through and talk to me still, 718-717-8296. And, you know, if you're on my Skype list, you can drop in as well. If you're not, real easy, Charles.Ochelli, if you know how to spell my last name, is my contact name on Skype. And I only remove abusive and obnoxious people. So, you know, you can just be on my Skype list, you know, for the show. Some people send me messages during the show. I didn't get to any of those tonight either. Let's take a look at what we have here. Well, you know what? Yeah, I was going to talk about some of John's history. One of the questions, Mark asked me, and I only give your first name, Mark, because I don't want to be accused of spreading the wrong person's name around or anything like that. And, you know, some people go under pseudonyms on the Skype. Especially these ones that keep sending me these weird sort of, you know, do you want to pick up a woman or whatever, messages. No thanks. I'm busy enough with what I'm dealing with already, thank you. Oh, and by the way, she'll be coming up at 10 o'clock. Jaded, I have no idea what that's going to be like. All I know for sure is that I did ask for a beer. So I'm going to have some drinks, and we'll see how that goes later on. Might get into some strange territory on that show, Jaded, which immediately follows my show. And if you're listening to this further down the line, I want to thank everybody who did decide to tune in. Here we go, tripping over the tongue. To tune in via the TuneIn app or any other app. I do appreciate it. If you're catching us further down the line, like I said, on YouTube or anywhere else, I also appreciate you. Anybody who takes the time to listen to the ramblings of the, you know, the guy that used to call himself the blind JFK researcher is much appreciated. Okay, so, yeah, whether you did that or you went to ucy.tv/TOE, which also is the way that you can get to the chat room and all that other good stuff, and it does work on most mobile phones. Thanks a lot. And, you know, what can I say? There we go. All right, so I actually do have beer now. Anyway, this might get more and more interesting as we go tonight. Right, John Barbour's history, Mark. Sorry, I'll get to that just a second. I had some notes on it. And let's see if the browser will stop telling me that I'm under all sorts of attacks. Internet security. Love it. Anyway, John Barbour, you know what? Here's where you may recognize him. Not only from the show Real People, which makes me rather dated because, well, that was, you know, a rather old show and all that. You know, let's see, what year was Real People exactly? You know, I think it was 1980, I believe. 1979. There it is. Right, Real People was in 1979. That's when it debuted. It actually ran until 1984. That's right. That would be the right time period. But there's other places that I have seen John Barbour show up before as an actor, also as a writer, as an interesting guy, like he said, as a film critic for Los Angeles Magazine and all that. But believe it or not, he was actually made a guest appearance in the show Breaking Bad in 2011 as the neighbor discovering the dead body, in case you guys ever watched that show. CSI, Crime Scene Investigation. That show he showed up on in 2010. There was a show called On Stage America, which I did not see, have no idea what it is. And also he was on Sanford and Son, if everybody remembers that. And of course, John loves to tell those stories about Red Fox, which I was hoping to get into one tonight, but John had other things on his mind. So I let him go, and tell you the truth, I have never heard John Barbour lose it so many times on the air using the the slightly rougher language. I've never heard that before, but he's pissed. I mean, the guy's pissed off. And isn't he pissed about some of the very same things that we all are? These people that, seem to listen to me without hating my guts. Oh, and let's see. I want to know what happened to Sarah Purcell. Okay, well, let's see. I'm just going to call you PC because I don't know what your name actually means. But anyway, PC, I don't know what happened to Sarah Purcell. I do believe we covered that on an earlier show, but I'll definitely keep that one in mind for the next time John wants to come on. And also, he's got that radio show going now. But, Sanford and Son I was telling you about. On the Sanford and Son show, Red Fox and all that good stuff. We all know that theme, The Junk Man. Probably one of the first, all-black sitcoms. I think it was the first all-black sitcom, if memory serves me. Well, anyway, in 1975, later on in the show as it was, he played a game show host, which was like a Let's Make a Deal kind of game show. And that was pretty interesting. Also appeared on The Odd Couple. And a TV movie called Pray for the Wildcats, which I've never seen. Also appeared on Ironside, which I've seen. And also an episode of Get Smart, guys. This is just some of his film credits, or TV credits, I should say. In addition to creating the Garrison tapes, and which is, now under the new name, the final word on the assassination and all that. Let's see, I do have a caller, though. How you doing, caller?
Hey, Chuck, how you doing?
All right.
Well, I'm going to try to do this without bringing the actual subject in with being crude or nothing, but a big old bunch of stuff going on in chat there. But, today, I'm not going to refer to specifics since this is going to record for downline and being aired out right now. But I find today that we have a little different definition today from, times past. And I think that applies in all aspects of life. And I'm not saying that either one person there is right or wrong, but I just find it odd that so many people in all aspects, all topics, assume themselves to be right in their beliefs and give no room for anybody else to be right. And I think myself personally, I was definitely quite guilty of that in the past, and I think my journey here, and especially with alternative media, has exposed me to a lot more information and ideas that my beliefs, what I think is true. I have to say that there's that possibility that I'm not correct in what so many times we call people sheeple and all that stuff, and we're in here in the chat room and we're really probably having topics that shouldn't be there.
Hey, Vince.
Perhaps is that censorship, or should we self-censor, or I might be a little convoluted in what I'm trying to say here because I'm not trying to actually speak specifically to the point.
No problem, Vince. You know what? Did I do something that started an attack in the chat room?
Nothing to do with you, Chuck. Nothing at all to do with you.
Oh, okay, because
completely off topic in chat.
Oh, that's cool then, because I turned away. I was doing something else. I was trying to get some notes up, so I wasn't looking at the chat room. But usually I say something that sets somebody off, so I thought maybe I did it again. But okay, that's good to know that it wasn't my fault this time. I did drop back in there, and I I read part of what was going on there, and I just said, well, okay, and went back to what I was doing because, to be honest with you, I didn't want to engage in that. So
yeah, it's definitely a sensitive topic, and people are very emotional about that. But I find that in recent history, we see history being rewritten. We see that history is written by the victors, and so we all, of course, are affected one way or another in our beliefs. I don't think anybody has. It's very seldom anybody has a original idea. We definitely we rehash topics. There's a saying, there's nothing new under the sun. So where do we go? I mean, can we have discussion on any topic and appear to not being taken sides or whatever?
I don't know, Vince. I try and examine things from as many different perspectives as I can, and I do my best to let people speak their mind. I don't necessarily jump on every single person that says something that I find disagreeable. I try and analyze the whole of their statements and put them all together. I mean, for God's sake, Vince, how many times have you heard me yell about Judith Baker? And meanwhile, John is talking about going and visiting at her conference. And I can't stand that woman. I mean, you've heard me off the air rail about this lady. But am I going to yell at him? No, because I generally agreed with most of what he had to say. What did you listen to the show just now? I mean,
yes,
with John.
I've been listening the whole time. I've had my headset on, listening on TuneIn on my phone and watching chat on mute in there. Down here in Texas at my cousins, and trying not to, interrupt their life here while engaging in, here at UCY. So it was freezing outside. I'll come back in. I'm going in the bedroom here so I don't interrupt the television in there. But anyways,
Vince, what'd you think of what John was talking about? Not what I expected to talk to him about tonight, but.
Well, I found the part about entertainment to be an important topic, because I think probably like you, I think entertainment's important, and a lot of people here, I personally, I don't have a television, but I do watch some stuff on Hulu and Netflix, and but I choose what I watch. I think it's good to be entertained. Humor especially. And I find myself to be
entertainment.
Guilty.
Entertainment is certainly a part of our culture, or lack thereof, at this point, right? And so John's commentary about that, not something that I really wanted to get into. I mean, you even heard me say, look, I'm not, I don't really care about the Oscars, but go ahead, But what he had to say was kind of interesting, that that this kind of nonsense passes for entertainment at this point, I don't know where it comes from that, Lady Gaga, I'm amazed that he thinks that there was something valuable to a Lady Gaga presentation, but what, it's going to make me take a look at it, though, because you know what? I guarantee you there's going to be something odd in that presentation. Because you ever notice that there's always this really strange sort of predictive programming that comes out? There's always like really bizarre symbols that go on with these large broadcasts, with these big public performances that always have, something to do with all of this crazy stuff that, you and I find ourselves reading about or trying to learn about, right?
And there's definitely an agenda in Hollywood, and there has been, and we can take that all the way back to Bernays, if not even before then, to influence the minds of the people around the world, and for acceptance of agendas. And so many people take a stand one way or another against certain things. And I think that goes back to the dialectic, and the problem, reaction, solution, that's used all throughout every aspect of society. It's all a matter of control. And I think we all here listening right now probably should, if we don't, at least have the sense to see through that and still be entertained, and then at the same time decipher some of that predictive programming that's being laid out. And it should not only entertain us, but inform us and educate us at the same time.
Well, right, and there's both positive and negative to that. I mean, we're all aware of the fact that every empire utilizes some sort of bread and circus to sort of sate the masses in one way or another. The Romans utilized, the gladiators. This is the way of the world. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that the sport wasn't something to behold. And that's the weird sort of balancing act you have to do. And I don't like to spend a lot of time on it usually, but every once in a while you do kind of get sucked in because you start to see that programming happening, and man, it's just one of those things you can bat back and forth like like a birdie on a badminton court. You know what I mean?
Right. Now, I think I've learned a lesson myself tonight that perhaps I don't watch my crudeness some, and perhaps something I really have a hard time doing is keeping my mouth shut. But maybe I ought to keep my mouth shut, or my opinions to myself at times, and maybe I don't need to say everything that I think or critique, certain people. Maybe I just, stay out of it. But for me.
No, I understand. I used to count myself among the smarter people in the room when I talked a lot less. So I hear you. I do hear you, but and that is the good thing too, is that the more that you have the ability to listen, to understand, and to analyze the viewpoints of others, as worthless as they may seem in your current state of mind. Because remember, a few years back, and I don't think your entire life were you aware of some of the things that you are aware of now, right?
Certainly not. I started out with Ralph Epperson about 20-something years ago, and basically that's kind of where I got my, more or less, started my journey on becoming more aware. Before that, some 35-something years ago, I started in exploring religion, and today, I have to say there's a possibility that I may be fooled in my religious beliefs, but I'm pretty comfortable in what it is I think I do know. And that goes as far, too, with, how the world works. I think I have a real good understanding about it. And I try not to interject myself sometimes, to the point of telling somebody else they're wrong and I'm right, because I have to admit that just as well as I think they're wrong, there is that possibility that I don't have the understanding fully neither.
Well, and that is one of those lessons you learn over time too. Is no matter how much you know, you really actually gain some real wisdom when you understand that there's a whole lot more that you will never know. You know what I mean? It's kind of the reality of the universe, my brother. This is the way things go.
There's some things that we can never know and never prove for certain, but we can certainly take a look at the evidence and draw conclusions in probability.
Well, right, and I've always tried to make my show about that discussion, about.
You do a fantastic job for sure, and I'd like to say I'd made a point some couple of weeks ago, I think it was, that you work at least as hard as 90% or better than anybody I know in the industry, and as far as in the media that I expose myself to, I'd put you at 98%. As far as you do a show, several times a week, and the only person I could say that would work any harder than you that I know is Jules, and she gives 100% all the time. Myself, I had to take some time out, from social media. I was just completely burnt out. What we do here, we get a little result in it. There's a little payback as far as affecting people, but to realize that the discussion that we're having, if we can only affect one person and that person another, eventually, we can hope to come to that tipping point where we can make a positive effect to change the world. Because right now, the way the world is right now, it's pretty much doomed. And until enough people can become aware and decide to not comply, as Hal Anthony, says on Behind the Woodshed, which is another one of the very best broadcast on air, and I count yours as one of them also. We just got to come to a point where we say, this is not right, and we do not accept it. And I think that's the purpose that we are about here. And I think sometimes the chat is a detriment to the network too, because we do sometimes get caught up in this little stuff. And that person that I do have a lot of respect for, his mom, that I think a lot of too. She's made some good points as well. Sometimes I think we may be driving people away. Maybe we do need to self-censor. So I think that's something I might be looking to work on for myself. We don't have to say it just because we have a right to say it.
Well, yeah, that's just like Dr. Simon says. Character matters. Another show that's on this network, and an excellent point. How you represent yourself to the world. Well, that does matter, actually. Your character will matter. It always does. And, those with the defective personalities out there, it's up to them to govern themselves. I mean, and this is the interesting thing to me, is that, people that are really ready, willing, and able to complain about the statements of others don't seem to check their own statements all that often. I mean, I get tons of nasty messages, Vince, all the time, from people that are just really angry at the stuff I say, the people I have on. I sometimes think that most of the people listening to me just can't stand me, and they listen to me just to get angry,
Yeah.
But
I think that's funny.
But you know what? I'll still do it, because as angry as they're getting, eventually they have to calm down, and some of it has to sink in. So, I have no problem being that raindrop in the ocean that I talked about when I first came on air here, when I was talking about the philosophy of what I wanted to do, and you have no problem with that either, man. I'm really, really glad that you actually pay attention to the stuff I do, and I'm also happy to have met you through the network and everything, man. So let me just say that. I mean, I know you say a lot of nice things about me, and I appreciate those. I don't feel as though I'm very worthy of them. I'm trying to get there, though.
I think you don't give yourself enough credit, Chuck.
Well, I appreciate it, Vince. I really do, man. And I'm at a loss when people say nice stuff like that about me. So, because I'm not used to it. I'm used to the hostile, you're part of this and you're part of that, and you're part of the problem, and and it's like, really, guys, I'm part of your problem. You think so?
and I think most of us would probably agree more if we weren't so definitive in our definition of what is.
And that means a lot of things, doesn't it?
It does indeed.
Oh, Vince. Man, I just I don't know. I think that sometimes we let our egos, lead, and we stop learning. That's what the problem is, because you have to feel like you have that little bit of knowledge above the other people. You have to be the smartest guy in the room. You have to be the smartest guy to call in and make a comment or whatever else. I mean, like about the point you were making about the revision of history. This is exactly the point I made to Jack Blood a couple of days ago, or I think it was Thursday, or no, it might have been Friday. I called into his show and made that very same point about how history is being revised in front of your eyes, and these are the kinds of things that we have to try and defend against, because we've already lost plenty of our own histories as it is. And what is the definition of is? Well, Bill Clinton gave us one. Or no, wait, he didn't. My fault. But
depends on what you define is as.
And of course, that works with ISIL and the IS and all of that other wonderful, likely to be Israeli and American-controlled intelligence operation that is ISIL, whatever the hell it is they're calling themselves this week. But
it's got to be a little pun right there, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I caught the joke in case everybody else didn't. That was the first thing I said. You know, when that whole thing sort of broke in the media and we were debating about it, and we were talking about it on the Roundtable show and everything else, I said to myself, you know, first of all, why is it that they're using English words to describe themselves? You know, second of all, doesn't this seem a little too convenient? But, you know, every time something seems convenient, you get labeled a conspiracy theorist. You know, you're not using your brain. You're not accepting the common wisdom of the day, the greater authority of information, you know, that tells you that 19 guys with box cutters, you know, totally destroyed 3 towers, one of which they didn't hit in New York City, and of course got into the Pentagon and some airfield out there in Pennsylvania as well, even though there's no evidence for a plane in either one of those last 2 places I mentioned. But these are 19 guys with box cutters and one other guy that happened to be Nigerian that really looks like one of those games of, you know, which one of these things doesn't fit with the other from Sesame Street. But there you go. You know,
I like to use that myself in referring to things in, you know, everyday life. One of these things is not like the other. So, but I would also like to say, and chide myself as well, each and every one of us in chat are part of this network, and I included. I think that we should all show a little more restraint, perhaps. I think we run off as many new people as we get coming over here because of what we have to say in chat, whether it be through lewdness, crudeness, or our opinion, and then attacking them and calling them shills and trolls and idiots and cattle and chattel and sheeple or whatever. So
yeah, I know for a fact that that's happened, Vince. We're almost out of time, by the way, but I know for a fact that that's happened. The people that I have personally made sure to bring over to this network have been run off after trying to, you know, bring themselves into the chat room and ask a question or whatever else, and they've described experiences for me, and I just kind of shake my head and go, well, you know, listen, there's always your mobile phone app, and you don't have to deal with the chat room if you don't want to, you know, and there are a great group of people that come to that chat room as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so...
Listen, I'm going to jump out. Before we run out, I just want to say thanks again, Chuck. I'm going to go back in here and get on the computer. I'm going to go share Jaded around. I've got everything pre-posted for the day, and let me go see if we can't bring some people in. If we got some new people in, y'all make them feel welcome, and let's not be on that attack. And anyways, love and peace, and thanks again, Chuck, for all your hard work. And thanks to Jules. She is my greatest hero. And love and peace, y'all. Bye-bye.
Right, thanks. So, anyway, we're just about done with all my time tonight, which means you got to stay tuned for God knows what'll happen next at 10 o'clock.
You're funny.
I'm funny, am I?
You're a funny one.
I'm a funny one. Looks aren't everything, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for listening to the Ochelli Effect on ucy.tv, and you can find that at ucy.tv/TOE. Also, I did finally get the donate button working, and those people that tried to donate something to me some time back, it does now work. I got my PayPal straightened out, so it's okay. You can do that if you feel like it, and if you don't, you know, there's always the network has a donate button as well. And, you know, every dollar that you do put in is absolutely appreciated. I know that for sure. So. I hope that everybody that took a listen to tonight can understand that, you know, we all do have differing views. You know, John is an interesting guy, and I love him. I love all of you people that have decided to listen, even if you don't love me so much. That's okay. I'll be the guy you don't like. But thanks for listening. Are you laughing at the look on my face, or are you just laughing?
I don't even know.
Okay, then.
You ready?
She doesn't even know, so therefore it's going to be an interesting show on Jaded coming up next. Of course, don't forget to call in 718-717-8296, and also she'll be using my Skype, so charles.ochelli on the Skype. And there you go. Try not to hurt yourselves out there, ladies and gentlemen, because there's enough other things in the world for you to get hurt on. Believe that. And also try and remember that, you know, love is a webcam, microphone.
webcam, microphone, up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, days and fondle slap of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously.